Welcome back to Movie Flix. Today we are going to recap 2002 action thriller movie titled Spiderman. Peter Parker's life changes when he is bitten by a genetically altered spider and gains superpowers. He uses his superpower to help people and find himself against the greatest villain of the city, Green Goblin, an evil maniac. Story takes various thrilling turns along its way, discovering roots of friendship, love and hatred, and even betrayal. But before we begin, please consider subscribing to our channel. Now, without wasting any further time, let's begin, shall we? Peter Parker is a nerdy high school senior in New York City. His parents are dead and he lives with his uncle and Aunt May. He has a crush on his next door neighbor, Mary Jane Watson, who is also one of his few classmates who is nice to him. Her boyfriend Flash and his buddies pick on him. Peter's only friend is Harry, who despite being wealthy and attractive is also an outcast. Harry, however, is somewhat envious of the affection of his father, Norman. Norman, the head of weapons contractor Oscorp, admires Peter's scientific aptitude and cannot hide his desire for Peter to be his own son. Science class takes a field trip to a genetics laboratory at Columbia University. The lab works on spiders and has even managed to create a new species of spiders through genetic manipulation and combination. While Peter is taking photographs of Mary Jane for the school newspaper, one of these new spiders lands on his hand and bites him. Peter returns home feeling ill and immediately goes to bed. But the venom injected by the spider bite begins to work strange magic on him at the genetic level. Meanwhile, General visits Oscorp to see the results of their new super soldier formula. When one of Norman's top scientists, Dr. Storm, warns him that the formula is unstable, General threatens to withdraw all military funding from Oscorp. Later that night, Norman exposes himself to the formula, gaining superhuman strength and agility. But becoming insane, he kills Dr. Storm and steals two other Oscorp inventions. The next morning, feeling better than ever, he learns his scrawny physique now ripples with muscles and his eyesight is perfect at school. The day he learns he can shoot webs out of spinets in his wrist, he demonstrates it by beating an enraged Flash in a fist fight. That night, he and Mary Jane casually flirt across the fence separating their backyards, designs a suit, heads out of the arena, telling Ben and May he is going to the library. Ben and May are worried about the changes in Peter's personality and insist on driving him to the library. Ben tells Peter not to fight anyone anymore. He might have the power to beat the Flash Thompson of the world, but with great power comes great responsibility. The responsibility to know when and how best to use that power. Peter reacts badly. Peter tells Ben that he's not Peter's father and should not act like it. Peter not only survives the wrestling match but he defeats Bonesaw in 2 minutes. But the prompter only pays Peter less money. Enraged, Peter chases down and beats a robber who falls out of a window and his body is recovered by the police. Inspired by Ben's effort to use his spider powers for the greater good, he designs a new costume and swings around New York, foiling petty robberies and muggings as the Amazing Spider-Man, the name he borrows from an announcer of the wrestling match. He does not endear him to J. Jonah, the editor and publisher of the Daily Bugle, is New York's leading muckraking tabloid. However, when he learns that Spiderman sells newspaper, he puts out a call to photographers for better photos for his front page. Peter, Harry and Mary Jane graduate from high school and move to Manhattan. Peter and Harry get an apartment together and attends classes at Empire State. Mary Jane works as a waitress and struggles to get acting auditions. She and Harry also begin seeing one another. Harry apologizes to Peter but points out that Peter was always too shy to make a move himself. Peter struggles to hold down a job. Norman offers to help him find one but respects Peter's desire to make his own way in the world. Peter sees Jameson's advertisement for good photos of Spider-Man and, webbing his camera in convenient places, gets excellent photos of his own heroic actions. Although Jameson does not pay well, he agrees to buy more of Peter's photos. Norman is also happy as he gets recognized after the debacle that killed Solcombe. As the Goblin, he attacks and kills the board of directors at Oscorp's annual Unity Day street fair. Attack also endangers Mary Jane. Spider-Man fights off the Goblin and rescues Mary Jane. When she nearly falls to her death, Mary Jane finds herself falling in love with Spider-Man. This feeling is only reinforced when he saves her from some rapist a few days later on a rainy night, and she thanks him with a deep kiss. She has no idea who he really is. Here, Peter decides that he and Spider-Man should be partners. He attacks the Bugle office to lure Spider-Man into a trap using knockout gas to subdue him, then gives Spider-Man a few days to think over his offer of partnership. He warns Spider-Man that the city will eventually turn against him and that they should rule it together. A few days later, on Thanksgiving, the Goblin stages a fire in an apartment building to get an answer from Spider-Man. As a result of Spider-Man's refusal to join the Goblin in their fight, Spider-Man receives a bad cut on his arm. When Norman and Peter meet for Thanksgiving dinner, Norman sees the mark on Peter's shoulder and realizes that Peter is Spider-Man. After realizing this, Norman quickly leaves the party. On his way out, Norman takes few shots at Aunt May. Goblin attacks Aunt May at home, sending her to the hospital while visiting her. Mary Jane reveals her crush on Spider-Man to Peter and they end up having an intimate moment themselves. Harry notices this and realizes his relationship with Mary Jane is over. Goblin kidnaps Mary Jane, then sabotages a trolley car along the Roswell Bridge. Spider-Man manages to save both, instead grabs Spider-Man and throws him into an abandoned building. The two fight and the Goblin overpowers Spider-Man, even throwing a pumpkin bomb directly at Spider-Man's face, heavily damaging the mask and wounding him. As the Goblin holds back Spider-Man and is about to kill him with dual blades, he makes the mistake of threatening Mary Jane. Enraged at this, Spider-Man beats the Goblin senselessly, overpowering him, but stops when the Goblin unmasks himself to be Norman. Norman shocks Peter by revealing that he is the Goblin. Norman then tries to persuade Peter that all of his actions were the result of Goblin's persona that has been influencing him ever since. At the funeral, the Goblin's body is laid to the rest. Jet Glider appears behind Spider-Man and that Goblin persona takes over. The Goblin tries to use his jet glider to kill Spider-Man, but he leaps out of his way just in time. As he dies, Norman asks Peter not to tell Harry about the Green Goblin. Spider-Man takes Norman's body back to the penthouse apartment. Harry sees them and blames Spider-Man for Norman's death. He vows revenge and thanks Peter for being such a great friend. Peter goes to visit Uncle Ben's grave. Mary Jane finds him there and confesses her love for him. She kisses him tenderly and passionately. Peter wants to tell her the truth but cannot. Instead, he tells her he can never be more than her friend. Mary Jane has an inkling that she might have kissed him before, but Peter walks away knowing both of his blessings and his curse in life. "Who am I? I'm the Spider-Man," were his final words of the movie. And this is where the movie comes to an end. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, until next time.